I think you're muted, Kane.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Okay, so today we were just expecting the market to chop sideways, but have a lot of volatility, and that's exactly what we got. So we were talking about maybe today is a good day, especially if you had all cash to just kind of take the day off and go do something else. And that was probably a good idea. Let's take a look at everything. This market is mostly waiting for those FOMC announcements. So there's probably not going to be too much to look at. I did take a tail risk trade on an earnings play just for fun. So we'll see how that works out. And then we'll just get an idea of what the market is starting to look at in terms of the Fed. So the S&P 500, we got a little bit of excitement. We moved down through that 540 level that I've been talking about, where I said we're not really going to be interested unless we break below 540 or above 550. Well, we broke below 540 briefly and then came back up, and then we ended just below that MA50 level. So I guess to the downside, we're a slight bias to the downside, but really we're just chopping sideways from last Wednesday until now. We're basically at the same level. We really just chopped sideways during that time, following or going in between that MA50 and the EMA 8. Although today we got a little bit towards the EMA 20 because it is coming down and that range is becoming more narrow. Until we get the FOMC announcement and the Powell conference, that we are probably not going to see ourselves truly break outside of these ranges. That 540 and the EMA 20, but more especially the 550 level. So it'll all depend on what Powell says during the conference. So let's take a look at what TLT did today. TLT continued to move up. So maybe some anticipation that he'll say something that will confirm interest rate cuts in September. July is basically a moot point. They're not going to cut in July unless they really want to surprise everyone and send this market skyrocketing higher. Let's take a look at VIX, see what happened there. VIX moved upwards, and that's not too surprising since we did come down a little bit in the S&P. So VIX moving upwards, this is not a huge amount relative to the bars that we've seen in the last week. So we're not going to get too excited about what's going on in the VIX. Let's take a look at where our money moved, because this morning was a pretty distinct downward movement all the way till we broke below that 540. We actually came pretty low to 538 before bouncing back towards the VWAP, coming back down. And then at the last minute, we broke through that VWAP. But look at what's happening after hours. We just right at the close, we crashed back down below the VWAP, and now after hours, it's going back down below the 540 level. So that's kind of interesting that that's happening, especially since we haven't gotten that FOMC announcement yet. This is actually kind of bearish for the market, but we don't want to read too much into it because it is after hours trading. And, tomorrow it could be a different story. We could trade right back up during the night, during the morning, and just get about break even. I don't know. We could trade even further down, but there's no real reason that unless there was some interesting news that happened or that we got some dark pool action going on where institutions didn't want to show their hand during the markets and then they're bringing this down. That's the only reason why this might actually hold. Depending on how the Europeans and the Asians interpret this, we could go lower in the morning. So let's see, or there was some major earnings. That could be possible as well. We'll take a look at earnings that are going on right now. But let's take a look at, blank my mind, Fed. Let's take a look at the Fed. Okay, 4.1%. It's happening tomorrow. So this will either go to zero or it will go to 100%. And if it goes to 100%, that's going to be a huge movement in the markets. Now, there's no reason for us to believe that it'll go in that direction because the data just doesn't support it. And nothing out of the Fed, nothing they've been saying has supported it. So we're really just going to expect this to go down to zero. And let's take a look at where we're looking for September, and we're still at 100% for a rate cut in September. And we'll see. We'll see what Powell says tomorrow, but I don't think so. I could be wrong right at this point. It's sort of a bet, it's sort of a coin toss because you just depends on what Powell says. But based on all the data and based on everything that the Fed has been saying and based on the trends and all of the numbers, yeah, we're seeing some improvement in some numbers, but not enough to justify us doing a rate cut in September. And if that happened, it would just be political at this point. And I don't think Powell wants to be viewed as being political just yet. That might happen more towards November, but right now it's too early for them to show their hands. So September is not too likely. I'm still rating it at about 20 to 25%. So let's take a look. Let's see if we can find a reason for this. So let's see what we had in terms of aftermarket. We have Microsoft, AMD. Those could definitely be it. All the way down. I put on Starbucks. So we'll see. We'll see how that works out. So Microsoft, AMD, SYK. Microsoft down quite a bit. Sorry about that. So this is probably why. This is probably why that S&P sold off after markets, is this earnings announcement from Microsoft, but we don't have the numbers quite yet. And then we have AMD. AMD did the same thing, but is recovering now, but they haven't even announced. So that's probably why they're recovering, because they'll wait until they get their own earnings actually announced before showing their hand. And then, let's look at something else. I actually am curious to see these numbers come out. So let's look at something else before we come back to this. I want to take a look at our sectors, or let's see our 90-day highs and lows. 340. Now that's really interesting, because this morning we were looking at sub 200, 185. So now during this session, we added on another 160 stocks making 90-day highs, but that S&P, it went down. And at some point it went down quite a bit, but it did go down half a percentage point. That is not, it's on the borderline of being significant. So this is interesting. So we want to see which stocks went up for sure, since we do have a good number added on to that 90-day high. Remember, our extreme level is at 400, so we're only 60 away. And if we get to a extreme level tomorrow, let's say at 400, and the SPY is still right here, and then our expectation is that it flips. So then where does that send the SPY? Does that send us even further down? That'd be really interesting to see. So that, even though that is say, hey, we're getting that positive momentum, it's not necessarily good news for the market at this particular moment in time. So I'm going to be watching that very carefully tomorrow. 90-day lows added a little bit, still double digits is not that significant, but this is significant. This moving up to kind of close to 400 is pretty significant on the SPY going down and not looking that strong. So let's see where our money went. Energies, financials, aerospace defense, home builders, retail, real estate. So these are all interest rates. Financials is probably interest rate also. IWM a little bit, and Dow Jones. So we got a little bit broader based. Some in industrials. These are basically random. Utilities, communications, healthcare, mostly random. And the rest are down, all beyond random. So staples, discretionary, biotech, tech, and semiconductors. Semiconductors down a lot. Okay, so looks like our semiconductors really dragged down the index. Let's take a look at that SMH. Ooh, yeah, that's not looking good at all. Let's see what that did to QQQ. So basically, what we're looking at is a very distinct downtrend, very clear. And it's basically following this purple line right here, the EMA 8. So we gapped down below the EMA 8. We traded sideways into the EMA 8. Well, it sort of gapped down, but traded very strongly downward. And then we traded back into the EMA 8. And now we're going strongly downward again. So if we keep this up, then we're going to expect a couple of days of going sideways until we hit the EMA 8 and then keep on going down. So that is not good news for tech. It's not good news for the QQQ. Yeah, same thing in XLK. So we were thinking that here, this is a bounce into the EMA 8, EMA 20. That looked like it could have been good news and potentially if we broke out, but no, we rejected from there. We gapped down below the MA 50 and traded strongly below it, and then had a little bit of a recovery into the EMA 8 and then a strong surge downwards. The tech is not looking good at all. And if FANG stocks report poorly, that is really, really, really bad news for the QQQ. So QQQ is looking more and more negative, bearish. So it showed up similarly in the QQQ, but not as extreme. So you could say gap down, recover into EMA 8, gap down to the MA 50, all the way down, recover into the EMA 8, and then another push downward. The difference between this and the SMH and XLK is that this did not make a new low. It got caught by the same area of support right here, which is pretty strong. That's why we drew a thick green box over here. But if it can break through this green box, then we're looking at that MA 200. So it's not looking that great. Of course, the FANG stocks, all the FANG stocks that are reporting this week, they could change that story and bring everything back up. But so far, it's not looking very good at all. And I'm glad we have our little tail risk trades on for the downside in the markets. So in TLT, we did in SPY. In hindsight, it would probably been smarter to do it in QQQ. That's looking far weaker than the SPY. But this will benefit as well because the QQQ is, there's 100 stocks that are all in the S&P 500. So that will, and very large mega cap stocks as well. So that has a pretty heavy weighting in the S&P 500. My guess, I haven't done the calculation, but my guess that it would weigh on the S&P 500 at least 30 to 40%. So if we take the number of stocks, it's 20% of the S&P 500. But because of all those mega weight cap stocks or mega cap stocks that are weighted into the index, it's going to be at least 30 or 40% of the S&P 500 if we just take a look at the market cap, total market cap. So let's see which ones are those mega cap stocks. Where'd it go? Here we go. Okay, we got Microsoft, AMD. So the only real mega cap is Microsoft. But AMD is pretty big. So is ANET. So is I don't know what SYK is. Stryker, medical device. Okay, Mondelez, very large. Starbucks, very large and important. And then Pinterest, First Solar. These are well known and well followed, but they're just not as big. And then we have a lot reporting today, but everything else is getting lower in the market cap. So I'd be interested in Starbucks and above. But let's see if we got some info on Microsoft yet. Still no. Someone must have that information because it did trade down this far. So we just don't have those numbers yet reported to us. So Microsoft down big. That's going to hurt the S&P. Well, it already is hurting the S&P. Let's take a look at QQQ. Yeah, it's hurting the QQQ more so. So tomorrow morning, because of Microsoft, chances are we are going to open lower. And then we'll see what the FOMC announcement does. So Microsoft, AMD, okay, chopping back and forth, but overall down. And we might have just be getting the announcement right now. We'll revisit AMD at the end of this, SYK. SYK way, 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 way down, and then way, way, way back up, and then way back down. So probably a reaction to Microsoft, and then people kind of got their cool again, and then we're reacting to SYK itself, but it's down. It is a large, it's number 3 on the list in terms of market cap. This is going to weigh down on the S&P. I don't know if it's actually in the S&P or in the QQQ actually. Let's take a look. SYK. Nope. SYK. Yeah, S&P 500. So this will weigh down on the S&P 500 as well. And then we have AMD, SYK, and then Mondelez, no, ANET, Mondelez, Starbucks. ANET down, so it tried to recover over here on its own earnings, but Microsoft, and I don't know the numbers, so I can't say, maybe on its own earnings it's down as well, but this is down. So everything down so far, that's going to start weighing on the S&P 500. Mondelez up, so a consumer staple is up. That's more defensive, so that's not going to be a huge bolster in confidence to the markets. So this will balance a little bit of what we saw, but not fully, definitely not all of Microsoft. It might help balance Stryker, but not AMD, not ANET, especially since ANET, AMD, and QQQ are all tech. Let's take a look at Starbucks. Starbucks up. Okay, so I picked the wrong direction. We'll see, but you never know. By the morning, all of the other earnings could have weighed down so much on the overall indices that even things like Mondelez and Starbucks, they could be dragged down with it. And even though they're up on their own earnings, the overall market floods them and they start going down. So we'll see. This is not over yet. And you can see that even though we went high, we came back down. We were at about maybe 1/3 of the initial move. So it's overall that tech especially is looking not that great. So our post market is down here at 554, which is near the low of the day, which is kind of in middle of this green box. And if it can manage to get to the bottom of that green box and break out, then QQQ is most likely going down all the way to the MA200. If it does do that, then I don't see any way how the SPY can hang on. It's going to get dragged down with it. And then we're most likely looking at correction territory. So what are the things that could save it? Well, Jerome Powell and what he says could balance some of that out. Although if I'm an institution and then Powell says he's going to cut rates, that is a longer term effect on the markets. It doesn't help the markets right away. People will start trading it right away, and then it'll boost up for a few days. Remember, news events affect markets for a few days, maybe a week. And then we've got to look at the market dynamics. We've got to see the market move on its own or carry its own weight. And the most important indicator of that is earnings. And if earnings are not playing out well, then, and if all of our FANG stocks are not doing well, like Google, gap down on earnings. And then now we have Microsoft gapping down on earnings. Do you see that? It's gapping all the way down to its MA200, just below its MA200. That is not good news. And if all the FANG stocks do this, or even let's see, there's probably about 7 FANG stocks, just say 2 more FANG stocks do this, then it's not going to be pretty. We're definitely going to see a lot more downside pressure. Now, I'm not going to trade that until it actually happens, but I'm going to start preparing myself and start planning for that to happen, since that's the higher probability event. And of course, I'll make a plan in case that doesn't happen and we're wrong about that. And we'll see how it all plays out. And then you just pick whatever happens, then you pick that plan and execute it. So now is preparation time because it's starting to get really interesting. And let's see, our post is at 539.72. So that is below our 540 level, where we said that if we break that level, then we're going to trade lower, probably to the MA200. So we could get stuck around here, this 500 to 510 level, since that's where we bounced off of before. By the time we get there, that MA 200 might be at that same level. So we're just be prepared. It looks like there is more pressure to the downside right now, but of course, new data can completely change that. Powell can completely change that. Additional FANG stock earnings could change that. And then our employment situation could change that. Let's take a quick look at other FANG stocks that we have coming this week. We've got Apple, that is on Thursday after market. We've got Amazon, that is on Thursday after market. Meta, tomorrow after market. So we've got three more. So if just two of those three move in the same direction as Google and Microsoft, especially if it's Apple, then that is not going to look good at all. So that's it for today. We'll end it right here. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll see you tomorrow morning.